this year, we've seen the rebasing, which has really significantly increased Nigeria's profile. Now the largest economy in Africa. And that says a lot, because it suddenly puts you on many more investors' radar screens. So we thought it was important to have a forum and a discussion around how we can leverage this situation that we find ourselves in. So really, decision around the rebasing and what we've seen from the rebasing, which is a much broader economy than people would typically associate with Nigeria. People will see Nigeria very much as an oil economy. And yes, while that is the case in terms of foreign revenues, the reality is that from the rebasing, we've seen it's a much more broad-based economy. So we felt, for those two reasons, it was important to try and spend a bit more time digging into what this rebasing means. And the theme of the conference, which is lifting the lid on emerging Nigeria, is that through this rebasing, we've seen a number of important industries emerge in terms of their contribution to the economy. One being ICT, for example, another being manufacturing. And that's why we felt it would be important to shed some more light on, again, those sectors. And then also participants who are actually active in that sector as well, in those sectors as well. What we seek to do really is just create a conducive forum for people to do dialogue. With dialogue, clearly, with knowledgeable people, you face challenges and you're able to look for ways to resolve those challenges. And really that's what our conferences seek to do. We try and identify thematic important issues. As you rightly mentioned, we've done Brick to Brinks. A couple of years ago, we thought, how do we identify some key sectors that, if these sectors are developed, will have the greatest impact? So agri, power, for example. These were sectors that we felt, there have been various research, studies that we've seen that, if we can get power right, just even slightly right, it can have a 200 basis points impact on our GDP growth. So we wanted to identify and look for ways for people to channel resources towards resolving issues in that space. When we looked at tomorrow's Nigeria, through empowerment, again, it's empowerment of the private sector. How can the private sector be better empowered and funded in order to be able to be a much more of a driver for economic growth, working obviously very closely with government, but to be much more of a driver. One thing I will say, and that's one of my takeaways from today's event, is that we had a presentation from Anil Gupta, who spoke about the mountains that we have to climb, and spoke about the economies in China, the economies in India. Yes, we know there are mountains. The good thing is that we have identified, I think, those mountains. What is great to see is that many of the leaders who are shepherding us through those mountains, be it the honorable ministers who spoke today, be it some of the panelists who spoke, the leaders of some of the government agencies, NSIA, NMRC, BOI. These are people that you're very proud to associate with. So I think we are, interestingly enough, probably in goodish hands, I would say. It's really up to us to try and implement. And as FBN Capital, we just want to be part of that whole ecosystem that's trying to facilitate this, some sort of sustainable growth in the economy. I won't say this is the house view from FBN Capital. We've heard what our economists, what their view is on, exchange rates, on oil prices for next year. We've heard our equity research analyst, and I tend to agree with his perspective that stocks are now cheap. I think, there's still a lot of value in some of these companies. And with the recent sell-off, I think stocks are actually now cheap. So it's an opportunity. Particularly if I'm a domestic investor, I see this as an opportunity. For an international investor, perhaps I'll be a little cautious, trying to get a bit more of a sense as to where is the currency going. It's likely to go in one direction. The issue is how far. So if I'm a foreign investor, I may be a little cautious. But at the end of the day, if I'm a foreign investor with a very long-term view, then actually coming into the public equity markets, there's some good opportunities now. So I wouldn't necessarily just put on the brakes, if I'm a foreign or a domestic investor. Yes, we have elections around the corner. Out of prudence, if you sit in a strategy session now in any major corporate and you're thinking of making a 10-year investment and you have 2 months, 3 months to election, you're probably going to say, let me be patient. And that's reasonable enough. But, should you necessarily be extra worried? In fairness, I think we've seen, and I think our head of research spoke about it, there isn't always the correlation between, the volatility and Nigerian elections is pretty weak at the end of the day. So, I think there's still a lot of opportunities here. If I'm a domestic player, I'm probably looking to buy some stock now, obviously selected stocks. If I'm international, perhaps I'll pause a little, see how the currency goes, if I may say. I think we have an excellent team. I think we have a team of people who understand that there's a certain role that we have as being a subsidiary of FBN Holdings, given its if I may say, stature in this Middle African space. As the largest financial group in Middle Africa, we have a certain responsibility. And so for us, it's only natural to take this direction of, hosting these kind of events, to create a forum where people can really discuss and drive things through, because we're only better off, our shareholders, all our stakeholders are better off, if we can find a way to find solutions to some of the challenges we have. So for us, we don't see it as unique, quite frankly. We just see it as a natural process we got to follow.